Good morning and welcome to the Big Buzz Breakfast Club. I'm Melissa Legowski, founder and CEO of Big Buzz Idea Group, and we are excited that you would join us this morning for Tweak It or Tank It. First, just a couple of housekeeping things. This session is being recorded and will be shared with you post-event via email. I know between last month's session and this month's session, we've seen a lot of folks who want to share the videos and share these sessions, and please feel free to continue doing that. We're really excited to know that these are useful to you and your organizations, and that's the whole reason we're doing it. So please keep sharing it with others. Today, you will be able to put any questions you have in the Q&A box, and we will address all questions at the end. We're going to go through a lot of examples today about events that have tweaked and tanked over our history here and share some stories. So then we will try to kind of capture any questions and maybe even some of your event questions specific to your organization at the end. And if you'd like to turn off the closed captioning, please click the button at the bottom of your screen to disable. We are trying to continue to make our events more accessible to all. Just a little bit about Big Buzz Idea Group for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. But I am a former executive director myself, and I learned very quickly that it was very challenging to get all of the things done that needed to be done as a very small staffed organization. And so I founded Big Buzz Idea Group knowing full well that many nonprofits lack the time, staff, skills, and funding that they need to succeed. Big Buzz Idea Group fills gaps in management, marketing, events, and consultation so that you can focus on the big picture and continue to position your organization to thrive. We will be sharing with you today that all of the, a lot of our experiences and lessons we've learned, and hope that they will be things that will help you level up your nonprofit organization. As we kind of think about what we're going to talk about today, you know, in my first role as an executive director, I think that we did 24 events a year. I was a staff of one. And so, you know, it was really interesting that in trying to juggle all of that work and all of those pieces, my board would then wonder why I wasn't doing certain other things, but 24 events really consumed me. One of them was a large scale fundraiser. And I learned pretty early on in my time as an executive director that I really needed to go through and think very strategically about what was the goal of each of those events. I think lots of times in the nonprofit space, we inherit things. You know, we come in, we replace the people before us, and organizations just kind of keep doing the same things year after year. And so as we have kind of gone into this COVID time, I think we always have to review and evaluate our organizational goals and our events and see if they are intersecting in proper alignment to really be able to have maximum success. But I do think too that 2020 is a great excuse for really shaking it up and kind of getting rid of things that are no longer working. It's helped us accelerate that timeline a little bit. It helps us to be able to have a reason why we're canceling or changing something, which sometimes has been hard. I know for in that first position that I had, we had an annual dinner dance, and you know, at the time, the organization that I worked for had been around, you know, since the 1940s. And so it had been around for a really long time at a time when dinner dances were really popular. But as the community that I was serving, it was a member-based organization, and the community that we served was really changing and transitioning. And there were a lot of younger people coming in and some new technology and artists. And, you know, that old-fashioned dinner dance just really was not serving the organization well anymore. It was costly, and it was time consuming, and it was cutting into people's weekends who did not want to give up their weekends. And so it was hard to get people to even attend. So it really forced us to look at, like, why were we doing this? And I think as we come through 2020, 2021 and into 2022 now, we really have the opportunity to continue to do this in a meaningful way and just really start to kind of usher out those things that are not good for the organization. And we'll talk a lot today about kind of the resources that, you know, go into this. And I want to help you guys kind of see more clearly about really kind of how much we're devoting to events that we may not even realize within many of our organizations. And just so you know, like, we will talk a little bit today. At the beginning of 2020, we had, generally 5 to 7 small events per month. We had a big event, scheduled for April, one for May, one for June. And so we too went through all of that, canceling, reimagining, experimenting, and then the adjustment that the rules were changing week by week, and they still are. So just when we start to think we might see a clearing, we still are not sure what the future holds. But I think that it's that much more important now that we are really trying to be very intentional. So all of your decisions for your events really should be very mission focused. I think that event planning is always a bit like walking a tightrope, and it is a matter of really trying to think about how taxing they can be on your organization. And with that lens, we actually at Big Buzz started out as an event company, and I've been one of the first people to often say that I'm just not even sure that every organization should be having events. And people are always surprised to hear me say that. But if you don't have a clear mission for why you're doing something, is it the best use of resources? And so I think that we have to really think about what goes into these and what the demands are on our staff. We're going to talk about a couple of ideas today and how you can maybe get volunteers or key donors or board members a little bit more involved. But there's a lot of risks and limited resources for most of you. Not everybody thinks about this in these terms, but there are 2,080 hours in an average person's work year. Special events generally take anywhere from 300 to 1,500 hours to produce, depending on the size and the scope of the project. I shared this slide last month, but want to just kind of frame our discussions today. And again, have you look at this. If you were to look at a high level employee, for the director of development, for example, if they're making $29 an hour and 300 hours on a small project, it can actually be costing your organization almost $9,000 in staff time. Those 300 hours, when you think about a director of development, are they, meeting with donors? Is there, ways you could actually generate more dollars with that same amount of time? Your project lead is a lower salaried person generally, but even then, right, if they're doing a large gala and they're doing a ton of work, it could eat up, that's more than half of their time in the course of a year. So it's hard to get volunteers to sometimes do a lot of this stuff that you can count on them. And so the staff is often left to pick up the pieces. And this is just meant to give you that visual snapshot of just how demanding on your organization's resources your events might be. I want to give a bit of an overview for those of you who joined us last month. Hopefully this will just be a bit of a refresher, but we really want to think about kind of that future forward event strategy and maximizing our resources to really work for your staff, work for your goals, your outcomes, and your mission. Everything should really be tied to mission on so many levels. So, what is your mission and what is it that you're serving? Why do you exist? It's not uncommon that people do things that take them way off their mission. We have one client that they had a large annual fundraiser. They're in the music industry, and they really found that they were smart, and they woke up and they said, this is deterring us from our actual mission work, and therefore we need to outsource some of the event planning. The fundraiser is important, and we evaluated it, and we need to keep it because it is important to our bottom line, but it shouldn't be, managed inside the organization because it's not mission focused. You want to not just think about where you are today, but you also want to really think about where your organization is going And I always think that you want to be kind of aiming for where you're going in the future. If you keep doing the same budgeting, the same events, that you just keep doing the same thing year after year, but you're hoping for some great expansion or growth, but nothing's changing, then you're probably not going to see that expansion or growth. Because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you're going to get the same results you've always gotten. And so it really is important to think about, what direction are you headed? Are there programs or initiatives that you want to add in the future? And are there ways to bring your events together to showcase those, support those, or fundraise for those in a way that you can message it and promote it to get to be more successful? Every event that you do should also have some very clear event goals laid out. We will talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But you want to be really clear, because if you don't have your event goals established, you won't know if your event is successful. You won't know if you should keep your event. So those metrics and that data and that information is so important in how you evaluate those events and whether or not they actually should be tweaked or tanked. That information is critical in that decision-making process. And then once you have those goals, you have to be sure you're allowing time to review and evaluate how the event performed. I know that as a staff of one, when I was doing this, we had our largest annual fundraiser, and come Monday morning, it was a full weekend event, and it was exhausting going into the finish line and then actually having the event. And then come Monday morning, everybody had so many demands on me. How many people, how much money came in, what did we accomplish? And we really had to hit pause and really have time to kind of catch our breath and then do all of the assessment. But lots of times we're so busy in the nonprofit world that, right, we just move right on to the next project. We get swept up in the demands that are put up on us. And so really allowing yourself to set time and space to do a proper evaluation is critical to your overall success in this area. I think it's really important that we recognize and realize that for many of you, we actually have a lot of community folks that I saw were going to be joining us this morning. And so for some of you, right, your goals are very different. And I think it's okay to think about that from that standpoint, that for some of you, it's pure fundraising. It's really important to secure dollars and help underwrite your organization, get your operational money, help fund a new program, whatever that looks like. The fundraising is always one of the key goals for an event. For some people, it's attracting more people to your area. I know a lot of you in the community world, you actually are representing neighborhoods and you want to get more people, foot traffic to support your local business community and finding ways to do that. For some of you, it could be media and recognition. It might be really trying to get your message out there on a bigger level. And so you've just got to take the time to really think about what success would look like for you and what you really want to accomplish. I think in this piece of it, as we go through kind of this tweak or tank concept today, it's going to be really important too that you know your audience. A big part of a lot of the projects that we're going to talk about, it comes within knowing your audience and who you're serving and who you're trying to attract. And as we start to kind of move into this, I know one organization that I talked to, they really wanted to have only one event a year. And so they were inviting their highest donors and they were inviting all of their volunteers to the same event and hoping to really be able to kind of just manage both ends of the spectrum out of that one single event. And instantly I knew that that was not going to work, because often the largest donors, they can afford a high level ticket, but your volunteers can't. Your high level donors might be expecting to be kind of catered to one way or another, and versus the volunteers are often like the family members of the youth that were involved in that organization. And so again, the youth weren't going to go to a fancy dinner. The parents of the youth didn't always, that's not exactly where they would hang out, or nor could they afford a high level ticket that might be required for that fancy event. And so it really became very clear that with two different audiences and the goals that they had for each of those audiences within their organization, they really needed to look and consider at having two different events, because it just couldn't be combined and really be successful. They would either have to underwrite the volunteers and the students coming to the high level dinner, which then they're losing money, or invite the high level donors to come to kind of an event that didn't measure up to what they were used to. So you really have to think about who your audience is. What are the thresholds? There's a lot of simple ideas you can do. And it just depends on what is the financial threshold of your audience, who are your donors versus your audience, because sometimes your constituents can't afford the donation levels, but really knowing those audiences, and for successful fundraising, you've got to play to those donors. You've got to really have ideas that resonate with those donors. So you really need to know that audience, know what the threshold is, know what kinds of things might tie into your mission, and that would also generate interest. And so we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go into this. So I think that, I love this tweak it or tank it concept. And prior to the pandemic, it actually is one of my favorite events to actually do in a live room and take people from the floor and the audience and to foster a more open discussion. But I would love for you guys to really start thinking about what lessons you've learned about your events over the last 2 years, and if it has changed anything, because there are some events, as you will see in a minute, we've kind of got a showcase of ours, but there are a few that we continued to kind of stay with a goal for a while, or we, realized that things had to change completely. Sometimes we were able to make minor adjustments, and sometimes we had to scrap whole concepts. And, it just really is important that in the nonprofit space, you're basically running a business. And if the business, any business, if they have a project or an activity that's not making them money or is costing them money, it really needs to be evaluated if it should stay or go. So RibFest Chicago is one of the events that Big Buzz is best known for. It is also an event that I started during my time as executive director in the North Center Chamber community. And it's very interesting. This particular project was created to offer financial independence for the host organization, the North Center Chamber of Commerce. They had been a recipient of some funding that it was cumbersome, and they did not want to be reliant upon that. They wanted to be able to sustain themselves in a better financial position. And so they really needed a large scale fundraiser. They were looking for something that could really secure significant dollars for them. They also, with this event, wanted to make people aware of their community. North Center is an interesting community in Chicago that falls in between a couple of other strong neighborhoods. And while it had articles in the newspaper dating back to the 1800s, a lot of people just still are not very familiar with North Center. And so RibFest Chicago really meant to help them bring this community to life. They wanted to promote the local businesses because they were a business organization, and they wanted to foster community within their community. It really was meant to be like an event for the people, by the people. And so overall, it was very interesting. It started out very slow. The first couple of years, like they made some money, but it was a lot of work and not a lot of, outsourcing or additional resources could be afforded in those early years. But over time, after 7 years, they really started to see a better financial trajectory, and they started to get more people from the community involved. They started to have a volunteer grant program. They started to be able to bring, they needed 600 volunteers at its peak over the 3-day event. And so really looking at how they could invite the community to help staff it, run it, represent it, manage it, started to become really important and really started to work beautifully for this particular project. Then, it's interesting too, because when you talk about kind of a tweak, I often tell our clients, and I don't think this is any different for you folks, but if we're not constantly leveling up or trying to improve an event, then you should fire us as your outside, outsourced partner, because I always think you can be leveling up. I think you can always be tweaking and adjusting. And so we are always trying to find those ideas. How can we do this better? How can we be more successful? And so within RibFest, we actually started, I think it was in 2011. The event started itself in 1999. And then in 2011, we actually added a component called Ribmania. Ribmania was, trying to kind of tie into that whole concept of professional eating. And so we were able to bring in professional eaters from across the country to compete for prize money. And one of the things that really was a huge goal out of that initiative was to get more media attention. The event was a sub event within our larger scale project, and it was always held on Friday night, hoping to get the media out, hoping to make a big splash for the rest of the weekend to have more promotion. And then we even started to add in an amateur component. And for a long time, we watched the attendance grow and the interest in the professional eating component kind of pick up. But, after about 7 years, we really decided that Ribmania was not meeting its goal. And so it's a great example where we had tried it, but we determined that it had run its course. And so that was something that we then scrapped. We brought in other components over time, always looking at kind of those mini events within the event, knowing that this is a food and music festival. We really always made sure that those pieces were there, but then we would constantly be adding in other things too. We tried more of a chef demonstration, and we've tried some cooking demonstrations, and just a lot of different things over the course of the time, constantly trying to keep the event fresh while not losing kind of its overall essence of what it was known for. And so that's just a great example of how you can, tweak pieces or tank pieces within an event, but still continue adjusting it for the greater good. As we were looking for 2020, before all of the events were canceled, we actually were going to continue innovating again and really mixing up based on some changes in the community. We were actually going to adjust the layout and have a larger family game area and just do a lot of things to continue to shake it up and just keep the event as interesting as possible. Another project that we worked on was WineFest, and WineFest was a fabulous event. I really loved it. It had, a small, it was a lot of food and beverage demonstrations, pairings, tastings. It was a lot of wine sampling. It was beautiful artwork and handmade goods of a higher value, and it just was a really nice atmosphere. Think stringed lights, think kind of summer nights outside. It just was really a beautiful, beautiful project. But unfortunately, there were many reasons why this event had to be tanked. The ability to purchase the wine as a nonprofit organization was very challenging. It was hard to find wine partners that would allow for us to be able to guarantee profits on the backside. It also was in a very limited parking lot. And that particular event, if we had been able to find a larger private space where we could charge admission, where we could really have a better ticket price, but it could still be outdoors, I think the whole project might have sustained itself a little bit better. But as it was, the financial opportunities were too limited for the amount of work and the amount of risk that went into this project. Therefore, unfortunately, it was very short-lived. It was a 2-year project, and then the organization kind of started to look at other alternatives. Another one of our case studies is Barbecue Fest. And this was a community that I think when you look at your events, again, right, I talked about knowing your audience, know your community, whether that's an actual neighborhood or whether that's a community of people that support your organization, there are similarities and commonalities within your group that you may not even often think about. But taking time to really do that deeper dive is important. I think that Barbecue Fest had limited success, and I think that there's a lot of reasons why. I think that the community was a mixed community. It had a lot of young urban folks who were moving out of one area and into this particular area because the houses and the homes were affordable for purchasing. It traditionally had a heavily large Hispanic population, and it had a heavily large Polish population within it. And so trying to think about what would appeal to all of those groups is one of the things that I don't necessarily think that the organization the leaders took time to do effectively. Barbecue Fest also ironically ended up being a week after Rib Fest, not in a community that's not far away at all. And so it started to already be in the shadow of a large event in Chicago, and that didn't necessarily play well to this particular individual project. And so things that, this particular project, we had actually recommended that it become a little bit more of something that would really focus on food, music, and arts. They ended up having a lot of arts organizations at different levels coming into the neighborhood. And if they had captured on that, I think they could have played to their own community strengths in a different way. As it was, it felt disjointed. There was a grilling demonstration one day. There was this wrestling another day because a segment loved the wrestling. So we were trying to tie to their audience. But just for a lot of reasons, this particular project ended up being disjointed, not original. I think that lots of times there's value in looking at what other organizations are doing, similar organizations, maybe in different cities across the country, kind of looking for that inspiration. But I think that sometimes you really want to also think about your immediate area, because if other organizations are doing similar events, like how do you stand out? How do you really embrace your own culture, your own community, and do something that's going to resonate with your mission and your people? And so you really always want to be evaluating those things and playing to your strengths. Incredibly important for your event success. At the end of the day, this particular event did not last. And so it's another example of a tanked project. One case study that I will share today is member programming. So we work with the National Association of Women Business Owners here in Chicago, and you will see us talk about a couple of different projects within them because they've given us a lot to work with. And they are very focused on some small group monthly programming for their members to continue to foster their community. They, in knowing their constituents and who they serve, they know that the importance of the relationships being protected and managed and for people to come and foster relationships continues to be incredibly important. And so whereas they were normally doing many small group meetups pre-pandemic, as soon as the pandemic and the remote working went into play, in mid-March of 2020, right away, NABO Chicago took their programming online. They held the community together and they continued to foster real discussions around what was happening that was incredibly helpful to all of its members, who are all business owners, who were all trying to navigate that turbulent landscape, much the way that you all have been. Everything was changing week by week. We were all trying to figure out how long is this going to last. And so for this community to continue to still have a place to come together with like-minded individuals was incredibly important. And where we knew immediately during the start of the lockdown and when that all came up for the organization, they had to show value to their members because we knew that, some of the members were going to have financial challenges. We knew that some might start to not be able to afford the membership in the organization. So we really knew that we needed to focus on the value of membership, and making sure this community stayed tight was very important. And so this was a great example of how that all worked by understanding our audience and making these fast pivots. And I'm really happy to report that instead of seeing a drop in members throughout the last 2 years, we've actually grown membership within the organization 25% as a result of being so responsive and immediate in understanding that community. So it's a great example of understanding your audience. Another project, kind of assessment within NABO Chicago is that they used to have 2 annual events. They used to have a celebration of achievement awards event in the spring, and then they would have a conference in the fall, right? That was twice the expenses, twice the man hours, or woman hours as it might be. But, the staffing costs were, all of the efforts were doubled. And so the board in their strategic planning at the end of 2019 planned for 2020 to actually merge these 2 events to make one full day event that would actually kind of leverage all of the staff time to maximize it, but still obtain both fundraising opportunities to hopefully have a more successful project. Unfortunately, the organization, had to pivot due to 2020. But overall, again, I think that as we just start to look at this annual event, how they merged these 2 to leverage their resources for maximum efficiency is a great lesson in really thinking the right way. What they were able to then do is take that conference online, and the timing worked out really well for them, because whereas in 2020, trying to do an awards event just virtually, that's not so exciting. It can be, I don't know, awards events have never really been my thing. I'm not always that interested in who the award recipients are and what have you, but often it's an obligatory thing that we have to do within organizations. But having the conference in the virtual world when they had to take it online really helped make a difference, because the content was again geared toward their audience and really resonating with people through the pandemic and bringing them the resources that they needed to survive and thrive. And so it ended up being a great time for them to offer a conference in conjunction with the awards, still honor and recognize people, but then there was a little bit more, kind of sustenance around it. And then they maintained the virtual event for 2021, and now we are really hoping that for 2022 it's going to be a hybrid event, so that those folks who are comfortable can come back to an in-person event. But we are, when we kind of talk about tweaking things, we are planning for half capacity, just making sure that the organization is not losing money. The board has decided that they would really rather have kind of supply and demand and fill a room and have to maybe turn some people away than increasing their risk. And then the ability for people to continue to tie in virtually will still be available. So nobody's really being pushed out. They just might not be able to be in the room for the luncheon portion. So we're going to continue to see how that goes based on Omicron and all of our recent events of 2022. With that annual event, I think there's a couple of interesting things. Again, when we talk about tweaking it, a lot of you have probably had to take your projects online. I know a lot of organizations that we talked to in 2020, they waited. They were able to either hold off because they had enough in reserves, or they were kind of playing wait and see to make better decisions. Whereas some people really had to push forward and find ways to take things online, and they've had greater success. All of a sudden, being able to not have the food and beverage cost, sometimes the fundraising was, the donations or the sponsorships might have been down, but because all of the expenses were down, they actually made more money. Some organizations, just continued to persevere. And so with this particular project in going online, we really tried to think about, again, right? We knew that this particular organization, the surveys of our audience have consistently talked about the importance of relationship development. And so how do we take a conference online and still create some some personalization and some integration. And so we were able to get a platform that offered an app, and that app allowed people to join us on their phone, online, on a desktop. And by catering to them and trying to make this easy, it started to make it, I think, just a little bit more foster more engagement. It was great because the app allowed for a wall where people could comment and share within the sessions. While we were using kind of this framework platform, we were still operating through Zoom. So all of the chats and the Q&A, all of those things were still there and available. And then there was a gamification as well. And so with that gamification, again, it kind of helped guide people through the process and get used to this new platform. Then in 2021, we made sure for this particular event, we didn't change the technology. We utilized the same technology because we had great success and people were already familiar with it. So we wanted to maintain that comfort level. But it was beautiful because between the platform and technology, we were able to, the piece that was missing in 2020 was a little bit more of that small group interaction. For this project, the luncheon portion, having the table captains, the table hosts be with their guests of 9 people for their table of 10, it was really a huge part of this project. And so we started to be able to have these small group breakouts that were set up exactly like the tables as if they were in person for a portion of the lunch. And that allowed those small groups to still have the conversations that they were longing for and the connectivity that they had been missing throughout much of the pandemic, which made the 2021 conference just outshine the 2020 conference in a lot of ways. There also is a platform, if you don't know about it, that if you have a community or networking is a big part for your organization, I would encourage you to check out Meetaway. Meetaway is a platform that does allow for people to put in their information in advance, and then you do like speed dating. So you kind of set the time frame for how long the groups are going to happen, and people can pick and choose what they actually like. If there are people in the group they want to meet, you can make notes about that. You can hope that the system's going to connect you with those people. If there are, quite frankly, people in the group that people don't want to meet, they can also make those notations so that they don't get paired with those people. But then it's really nice. You go into the room, you have your 5 minutes or whatever your time frame is, and then you get a notification when it's about up. And if you want to stay in that room, both parties have the option of saying yes or no to extend the time. So if you did find a really good connection and you want to keep the conversation going, you can absolutely do that. And if but if you want to move on, you can also do that. And if you don't both say yes, it will just continue circling you, and then you can follow up with that person outside of the event. I also see a question in the chat about what app we used, and for the conference we used Socio. I know that their price has gone up a little bit, but as we have continued to keep an eye on a lot of the platforms out there, I do think that an awful lot of them are really, really expensive. If you have good technology, some people can kind of manage with a landing page and the Zoom features these days, and you can have a great project. Socio, I think, continues to still be a relatively affordable option if you maximize it and utilize it. And with the, within this platform, we have the ability, the company helped us get the app licensed. They developed the app for us. So, I mean, there is a lot of pieces around it that I feel are very worth it. And if we had other events during the course of the year where we could utilize the platform, I think we could also kind of continue to leverage it for greater gain. As it is, this particular organization is only using it one time a year, but it works for them. As we move along, another project that we have worked on is AppleFest, and this particular client came to us. The project had been a one-day event for over 25 years, and it was a small footprint. It had gotten to be too crowded. One of the main focuses for them is to continue supporting their local businesses. And so for a long time, they had not thought about monetizing this event. However, the fact that it was one day, that it was overflowing, almost to the point, right? Like if you have a project and people can't move or it's too crowded, right? It becomes counterproductive to what the goals were for the organization. And so the client came to us and we immediately started to make a lot of adjustments. We took this to a 2-day event. We added additional real estate within the footprint. So we added a whole nother block and we started setting up gates and asking for donations at the entrance points. Not everybody may know, but in the city of Chicago, where we do have a lot of outdoor events in the spring, summer, and fall, you cannot charge people to enter a public way. And so what you can do is ask for donations, but they had just never set up gates and volunteers and made that ask. And it's very interesting that whereas some events in Chicago have people who will try to come through the gates and don't donate, this particular project actually had people waiting at the gate to make sure that they donated because people love this event. It's all focused on apples. It's very family friendly. And so it really has now started to add an additional revenue stream to the organization. And this particular client has been able to grow from 3 staff members to 5 as a result of some of the additional revenue that's generated through this project alone. It's another one too that actually, as I think through, so and talking about tweaking, in 2020, we took the event online and had just kind of a small farmers market instead, the weekend of the actual launch. But we had where people could pre-order food and market items online to support the project, support those businesses, and again, continue to help small businesses stay alive, which really resonated with this particular community very well. And then in 2021, we actually took it back to the street and we weren't sure if we would see dips in attendance or what things might look like coming out of the pandemic as people were trying to get more comfortable with getting vaccinated and being out in public. But we actually set records on attendance. So it continued to come back stronger than ever. And again, just really, really great support for that particular project. We have a couple other examples too of, I think, again, these are based in communities. A lot of our early work in Chicago for Big Buzz was around a lot of community projects. And it's interesting because, again, in Chicago, there are 75 neighborhoods. So when you talk about knowing your audience and understanding who you're serving, we had to really embrace that in every one of these projects. And there are these next 2 projects are both economic development areas within the city. And we were trying to figure out, what would resonate. We had a great holiday event down in on Clark Street in Lincoln Park. And this particular project, it was set up to have an outdoor component to bring people together. And then it was meant to have a shopping component. So the stores were led to stay open for the evening and invited to have specials and, offerings. And we tried it for a couple of years. Santa made his appearance and there were photos and, we would have a children's choir come and sing carols. And it was really fun and a beautiful event. But we just, in measuring, again, kind of surveying the businesses, finding out if the traffic had increased or not, we were not seeing the sales and the goal of the whole expenditure was not really being, it wasn't having the outcomes that we were seeking. And so while it was lovely, it's another example of a project that got tanked. Artrageous was also in that same neighborhood, and we took a lot of innovation. There was a lot of artists and there were a lot of contacts and a lot of businesses. And so we went to the project actually took kind of local artists were recruited, local businesses who wanted to display the artwork were enlisted. And then we would work between the two to be able to have the art pieces installed in the businesses. There was a big opening reception. And then the artwork stayed out for, a full month to engage community and invite people out and try to get more people into the businesses to see the artwork. And again, it just, for the amount of time and energy and effort that went into the event, we were not seeing the outcomes that we really were hoping to see. So it is another example of an event that did not sustain, it got tanked. But I think I like bringing these examples to you because I really do think it's important that sometimes it can be hard and we have to look at our events really in a focused way to ask if they are serving our purpose and our mission. And sometimes, right, when I had to go through my list of 24 events, I was looking at, is it a fundraiser? Is it a fundraiser? Is it goodwill? Like all of those have a place in many of your organizations, but you have to be really clear about what that is. And I know when I was doing those 24 events, I also had certain expectations put on me to be on a couple of other community event committees. And those returns on that investment just were not there for the organization. So again, is that something I really should have been doing? I'm not sure I should have. So as we look at the last case study that I have today, Harvest Celebration was in Rogers Park, and it was on Howard Street. It had a goal to provide a safe environment and to continue to invite out residents from that community to come out and utilize the recreational areas in that neighborhood, to promote the businesses and also draw more people from the surrounding area to that community. We watched this event took place for a few years, and it did continue to kind of steadily increase. Numbers were going up. The demographic blend was exactly what we were shooting for this particular project. It was really, it was wonderful. I mean, it brought opportunities to experience kind of some, country fall activities around kind of the pumpkin, decorating. And we had a hayride that went through the city. And those are things that some of the urban children were really enthralled by because they had never experienced that. But then the event just got flat. And so, it was our recommendation to the client that they look at doing something different. And, they went, and in an effort to really find a unique activity, one of the great things they're doing out there now is a chalk fest. And it's a lot of art creation, and it's a different environment. And I think that they've done a really nice job through the pandemic of also videotaping it and sharing it both kind of virtually as well as in person, and activating on that in a different way. So again, I think, you have got to every year look at those goals and just see, are you staying flat? Is there justification? COVID, for some projects, it may just have put a pause on things, but you might definitely want to get back to what you were doing. But for some of these other ideas, you may need to start thinking about something differently. I know some organizations, again, have had great success, and so they want to continue what they were doing and carry it forward. For those of you who might feel a little bit stuck in some of your projects, a few ideas that I have leveraged over the years to innovate is to, think about current trends. What are people watching on TV? What are activities that are hot? What are songs that are hot? Can you bring those things to life in a unique and different way? I think about, sometimes there are children's organizations that, are trying to find family activities, or what could they do? And I think right now, all of these cooking and baking shows are all the rage, and there are some amazing young chefs. Is an organization like, yours, if you're serving a youth population, could you do something like that would both be interesting in person, but also very much something that could be, streamed and be able to have tickets sold and get more people behind it and supporting it? Could there be competitions? Could it be an advanced, kind of like a bracket advancement to then the finals? And what would that look like? So, leverage things that are hot in the current landscape or in your neighborhood, your city, and just try to find some unique twists on those. I think nowadays more than ever, people really want you to create an experience too. I think that, you know, people want to get outside and they want to touch and feel. And I think we appreciate that more or value that more than we ever did. But I think we also, in this day and age, with all of the technology and everything else, we're like instant gratification, right? We're constantly moving and short attention spans. And so when you have that experience, it kind of gives people a little bit more of a destination, a little bit more of something to embrace. And I think that even the a lot of placemaking activities have started to create experiences for people in public activations. I know one nonprofit who really started to do a pop-up market in an outdoor space that they have access to, in a way to, again, help, some people who were trying to sell their wares and survive through the pandemic and make a living, by putting it outside where more of their audience was comfortable. It started to bring these things together in a way that helped everybody in a time when, many people were tired of being home. They needed a change of scenery, but it still allowed the open air environment and kept people safe. I think you also want to really look at leveraging your top donors. I think one of the things that I've seen with some fundraisers and some activities is, whereas normally we would maybe have people all coming together in a large ballroom, it would be super expensive. I've seen a lot of galas and, big events start to really skinny down. Instead of a whole night or a weekend night, maybe it's a weeknight because people don't want to give up their personal time. Everybody's kind of exhausted from this pandemic lag. And so having small groups in people's homes, maybe your top donor could host friends over. So there could be small watch parties that stay within the health guidelines and start to create community there around your theme, your mission, your goals. And then those hosts can also have talking points and be very well positioned to help you continue the fundraising and be a spokesperson within their own circle. So I've seen that work well for a couple of people too. And then I do talk about those small group activations as a separate list there. Take time to brainstorm. I think sometimes we get so caught up in how many demands we have, but pull together, some of your most creative people or your team and just really throw things out and allow the room needed to brainstorm. Throw it all at the whiteboard, track the ideas, no matter how crazy, and then think about, like, what would this mean? What could this look like? Maybe do surveys, get some feedback. You may have some really creative people on your board, and so finding out their ideas or thoughts could be helpful as well. And then review your organizational assets. Think about your board contacts, your staff contacts, and anything that might give you leverage in this time, because I think you really want to often play to that too. I know that sometimes an organization, an example of this, may have somebody who works at a high-level company, and if you go to that company or you leverage that relationship, you may be able to get support or unique access to a unique experience that others can't. So really thinking about what might be available to you from that standpoint to help you stand out is important. And my last key to innovation before I open this up for any question and answer is really also around utilizing video and broadcast. At this time, I think that video has never been more accessible to nonprofits. And so even like small videos can be very useful. I've seen a couple of our clients start to utilize more Venmo donation requests and putting them out on display and more and in a more intentional and active way. And so I think continuing to think differently about some of that, but even nowadays, with Zoom or iPhones and Android technology, like the videos are at our fingertips. And so capturing that, if you are putting together an in-person event and then sharing that with more people, I know one of our nonprofits, they took their video, they had their highest level donor event, recorded the whole thing because it was no extra work. And then that got shared on a second night with the next tier of donors. And so they were able to kind of do some focused outreach and with really like no additional planning other than the scheduling and the registration. So that worked out really, really well for them. So at this time, I would love to find out if you have any questions, if there is anything that I can continue to answer for you around this, or if this has sparked any ideas or thoughts around events that you have for yourself. Is there anything that I can further support you on? All right, it seems like oh, there. So we partnered with the Illinois Wine Association for our virtual conference. I can share more. That's a great idea. And, you know, I think leveraging those kinds of relationships and what you can do is really great. I know that some organizations have done some wine and charcuterie activities. I know some organizations who have done some, again, creating the virtual experience and helping to entertain people. And they've done mystery dinners remotely. They've done escape rooms remotely. So I think there are a lot of partners and opportunities out there for sure. And then I think as we come to a close, you know, if anybody does want to schedule a time with me, I'm always happy to take calls. I'm happy to talk with you a little bit more. We did have a question just come in. As a nonprofit, oftentimes we include the full staff and board in our event post-mortem, but it's like pulling teeth to get anything out of them in terms of feedback for a lot of our events. Do you have suggestions for leading engaging post-mortems? You know, one of the things that we have done is, so sometimes we will send a write-up, you know, kind of where we ask the questions to each person individually. Sometimes we get great feedback from our volunteers, people when it's kind of one-on-one, it's like just them. Sometimes they give you more stuff immediately. I think maybe giving people the questions in advance, and I would continue to ask a lot of questions. I also think that we can potentially feel uncomfortable with the pauses in the room when we ask the questions, but it's okay to hang on. It's okay to not advance the conversation until you get some of those answers. And I would continue to have you do maybe sometimes having everybody in one place. The board might expect the staff to do all of the work or the heavy lifting. So sometimes I wonder if dividing the groups by category might help with that as well. And then how long before an event do you recommend starting the process of re-envisioning the event? So I continue to think that that's something you almost want to be doing all year around. You know, as we head into a project, we're always making a list of notes and being ready for those things that we want to start to adjust in the future. And then immediately after, in that postmortem, when you're looking at your metrics, that's exactly, we generally start, okay, what did we like? What do we want to tweak? What do we want to tank? How is this event performing? So you can decide right away for what comes a year later. So it really is a year round and an kind of as soon as you can type of thing. I thank you all for joining us today. Again, if you do want to follow up with me, I'm happy to connect with you offline and continue the conversation. We at Big Buzz do offer additional resources for powering nonprofit professionals. And so we offer these breakfast clubs on the second Thursday of every month. Next month, we are going to have a great panel talking about kind of diving into the diversity and really removing some of the biases that might be there that we don't even see, and kind of advancing, you know, how we can move our diversity and to think tank their problems in a confidential setting. And then I'm always available for additional consultation if that would ever be helpful. With that, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I hope you have a great day.